If you have any more questions, please let me know. So in subsequent days, what we are going to see is what is atomicity. That is, we are going further onto this one-to-many relationship in a real-time scenario. I am going to have my item master. So this is what I am going to see in subsequent classes as well. So this is, we call it as understanding atomicity. It's also called exercises. There I will try to teach you what is constraint, check constraint, etc. So let us create all this table today because it comes under creation of tables with check constraint. Then we move on to the order master, order details, etc. And another most important concept called begin and transaction. This is the most important part in the database situation. A developer has to do all this. Without that, a database is not clean. The structure is not complete. This is coming up in the understanding atomicity. This will take, today we will create all the tables, whatever is required for this, and tomorrow we'll see all the other concepts which are mostly used, or whether it is used or not, we need to test all those. So we need to bring situation in such a way we are able to test all these categories, because we don't know whether they have done it or not. But how do I test? That is what I am trying to explain you. Right? So this is a thing that we will see in the subsequent classes. So understanding atomicity. Now I am taking one important properties of the design called atomicity, either all or none. I don't want partial insertion. So how to do it, that is what we will see as we go. Right? First is, let us now do this part. I like to create table for buyer, item, order master. Why I am taking this transaction is because in day-to-day living, you are all dealing with this. Right? Somewhere you might have purchased an item, and in that item you may have a buyer master, you may not have a buyer master. There is two purchases called, one is cash purchase, another is so-called credit purchase. In all credit purchases you need a buyer master. So there is another question. In a DB testing we need to create the tables. You don't have to create the tables, but you need to know all these concepts. These are all already done. You are testing, when you are coming to the testing, all these are already done. So you are now testing from the UI perspective. But there are certain things from the UI you may not know, or you may not test certain conditions which is exclusively for database testing. We are covering only those portions, right, which are exclusive for the database. One is the delete operation, recreating the delete, right, how it works. Is it referring is happening or not? Some people may not have set the primary key at all. If you don't set a primary key and mapping, I'll explain you that as well as we go. Right? So the backend process, is it structured properly or not? Unless otherwise it is tested, you will not know. So I am telling you now with the perspective of the normal standard of database structure, but everybody may not follow the standards. I'll explain you all those as we go. So I'll create a table for buyer, create a table for item, create a table for order master. Very simple, we just create one or two columns for this. Here when I create, I'll try to create without a primary key. I'll show you what are all the problems that will happen. Right? So generally what user will do. Now I'm going into another query window. I'll take, now in the same DB testing, I will now create table, buyer, column. I'm not going to set any primary key now. This is how generally most of the very novice or freshers who are very new to this, this is the way they create buyer code, because they don't understand what is the importance of primary key. So I'll just make as normal user does, buyer name, varchar 100. So I now created a table. So create table buyer. What is the column name? Buyer code. What is the type? Varchar 20. What is the buyer name? Varchar 100. I have created the table now. I create another table. Create table. Another is item. I just create item code. They never set comma item name. I am just keeping it as simple as possible because in your case what you need to understand is how your application misbehaves when I don't have a proper DB structure, and how do I test. What is the difference between the character and a var character? You say, for example, I'm storing the space of 20 bytes, 20 length for a varchar. Each character, 20 characters it is. Each character takes 8 bytes. So 8 into 20, around 160 bytes. Sorry, 8 into 20, 160 bytes. I store it now as a table structure. If I give a name, I am going to give a name, say, buyer code as AB. AB now occupies 2 into 8, 16 characters, 16 bytes of data, bytes of space, right? Now I reserve only 16 bytes against this column. I will not reserve 160 against 160 characters, 160 bytes. So that is the difference between a character means, but that is definite. So by definite, I will keep 20 reserve space for this, whether you use it or you don't use it. Whereas if I use varchar, only used bytes, I will store the space. So for used is 2, 2 means 2 into 8, 16. Only 16 bytes against 160 bytes. This is what varchar is all about. Right? So in case of character, then for AB value, system reserves 160 bytes space. So that is the reason we are always using varchar. I hope this is clear. Right? Now I'll created a table now. Create table item. Now the next table is order. So create table order. Order master or so order master. So sorry, I have used create table order master. There is another question called varchar 2 and a varchar. Varchar 2 is most still sophisticated. So I have a 32-bit system, I have a 64-bit system. So I manage my bytes according to the bits in the system. So varchar is more precise, varchar 2 is more precise, and the maximum characters I can store in a varchar is limited. It is 8000 characters, I think. It cannot go beyond 8000 characters. I cannot set varchar infinite. Max means 8000. Varchar 2 I can increase beyond that as well. That is about varchar 2. There is another called a text. Text means unlimited. You can put a 1 GB of data inside the column. So these are all the finer differences between the types. So varchar 2 can take, so varchar is limited to 8000 characters. So varchar 2 it can go up to, I'm not sure about the limit, it can go up to maybe 1 lakh character or so. Right? That is the difference, finer difference between the varchar and varchar 2, but all reserving of space happens as per the actual usage. There is no difference between varchar 2 and varchar. Whereas the maximum number of data characters I can store in a varchar, that is limited. So that is the difference. So now create table order master. I create this table. With order master generally will have a buyer, order number, right? Order number. Order number I'll generally make it as a numeric. Say I make it as a numeric. So no primary key set, no auto increment set, right? Then I'll now make it as buyer code. Buyer code is mapped here. It is not buyer ID as we have discussed. Generally what they will do is they will make here 25. They will give a different character as well. Whereas actual buyer code was 20, developer is allowed to create 25 as well. So buyer code, then buyer name is not required, normalization principle. So varchar, make sure the spellings are right. So varchar, I keep here 10. So I'm just trying to show you what are all the mistakes a person can do. Then quantity ordered. So quantity ordered, it's a numeric. A quantity should not come here. It is item code also should not come here because it's a master. Because one order can have many items. So I can say here maybe created date. Created on. I can have a created on. It is a date and time. So I just created. This is my structure for order master. I created this structure as well. Now I have order details. Create table. Order details. In order details, I generally refer order number. Order number is a base, numeric. So here they may give 18, right? Then item, I don't go into buyer code and created on. Buyer code is the order master, whereas item code is part of my details because one order can have many items. So that is the principle behind. So please note, I have not made any identity column, I have not made anything. So I want quantity here, numeric. I can have a 2-digit decimal because there is a possibility of fraction. So here I make a check constraint, quantity to be greater than 0. I made a check constraint here. This is a new topic for us. Right? Item code, quantity, I just made this. 10, 2 is 2 decimal. 10 is the total character length, total width. Out of that 2 is decimal. So 8, maximum of 8, 2 it is allowed. So I copied this. So I am now creating all this table. So with this now I am created all the tables over here. I execute it. Make sure in case if it is giving an error, don't worry about it. Try to understand where the error is, we can correct it. In between we have typed in some text. That text is being commented. So / as per our C syntax. So I just say created now. All the tables are created now. So if I go back to my tables, refresh. I go back to my tables here. You can see now buyer is created, item is created, order details is created, order master is created. All these 4 tables are created now. So we need to insert records for each of this table and then try to understand what we need to do, what are all the common mistakes a developer does. First is here you can see the structure itself is not appropriate because I have not set the primary key, I have not set the foreign key. When primary key is not there, there is no question of foreign key and there is no auto increment as well. So there is no auto increment, there is no primary key, there is nothing. So this is assume that this is the way a database is created. So what will happen if a user enters the data into the system? How we are going to manage it is what we are going to see in the subsequent classes. So understanding the database from the perspective of UI is very, very, very important. Because as such people may think I don't get into a database, why I need to learn database testing. So database, we get into the database procedure level, then it is called white box testing in a database. From UI itself I know where the problem is, then it is called black box testing in the database. Very simple, right? So how it is all done is what we are trying to explain you here. What makes it cost to get into the database? So we'll start tomorrow from this understanding. So we have created the data ready now. Atomicity is our main focus. What all the things needs to be done in Atomicity we are going to see. So I'll share my scripts. I'll share my all the PPTs as well as we get into. I have already done all this, so you don't have to worry about. So I have created here with the primary key. We are now seeing without a primary key to explain you better on that. Understand, right? So we'll continue this tomorrow in tomorrow's class. So tomorrow's session will be mostly towards the atomicity, complete understanding of the atomicity with and without, right? This kind of creation that we are now doing is called DBMS. It is not RDBMS, right? So it's a very fine difference. As a SQL or a Oracle, he doesn't bother about whether you are creating it in RDBMS or DBMS. He allows it the way you create. So we'll see it as we go tomorrow. So any other queries, you can just put me into the query window so that I can answer those questions. If you please feel free to contact me for any technical queries. Interaction is very important. Without interaction, it is very difficult to get everything, because we are talking about 20 hours session. So can you become an expert in database testing in 20 hours? Answer is no, and answer is yes. Yes, if you practice. After this DBMS class, every day you need to practice minimum 1 to 2 hours. After the session, you have to practice for at least 1 month with several applications that comes to you into your purview. Try to break the database. Try to see, assume that developer might have made a mistake. I need to find out that mistake. How do I test? How do I make my test case? That is one which makes you to learn the database. Be confident on SQL query. SQL query, that is the select component, joins, and I am not complicated any joins. We will complicate that as well. So be careful, be vigilant on the SQL query. These are all today's need for anywhere, for any tester in the market. Without that, there is no market, right? There is a person who is asking me a question, what is the difference between a RDBMS and DBMS? Please go through my recorded session. That is the best answer I can give, because this is what we are explaining from the day one. Right? Please tell me where to test in DB. So you have to do that. Even though we are talking about a DB, if you are working on a say application, even though we are talking about DB, you need to test it from this place. This is one of my product. So from UI only you have to test the DB. But the way you test it, you have to create that situation through UI. You need to make sure by this situation you need to understand it is a DB problem or is it a database, is it a UI related issue. That is an experience you have to get. So I have to test it everything from here. So I think dev. So from UI you need to test this database as well. This is called black box testing of database. If I go to the procedure level, I need to test from there. So unit of measure, I am just creating an unit of measure now. So if I delete this unit of measure, what happens? If I delete now one unit of measure here and I create it in a same name, different code, what will happen to the already existed records? Whether it is mapped to this or what will happen to that? Already I mapped some records to this UIN. What will happen to that record? So these are all the way you need to test when you are testing the DB. It is entirely a different approach you have to make. Keeping in mind that developer has done this mistake now. So when he does this mistake, what I need to do? How do I relate? Right? If it is relational database, how it will work. If it is non-relational database, how it will work. So you have to test from UI only. That is a starting point. When you come up with the error, then they will expose you to the query window. They will expose the database to you. You can also find it out from this place when they have a shortage of a developer. Right? Then the learning becomes very interesting. So as a tester, you will always start from the UI, but you have to test in such a way that you are trying to find out where the bug is. I will explain you as that is what we are going to learn in this 20 days. First, once you understand the structure, I will show you the problem in my project itself so that you understand better how it is. So these are all the main pain areas in the database testing, right? Fine. So I'll end here today's session. We'll continue the session tomorrow. Please make sure you